Martha already knows you, and George doesn't, but I just wanted to tell them that you live here in Richmond.
Yeah.
And that you're the annual fund manager for Feeding Chittenden.
Mm-hmm.
And that you are the chairman of the Vermont Garden Network, chairman of the board of directors, and the co-director of the Richmond Community Garden. And I would like to attest to your gardening abilities because I saw you harvesting the most beautiful things last fall. Yeah. So anyway, I think, yeah. And Martha and I really enjoyed being part of the pilot program of the community garden. So that's what I wanted to say.
Thank you, Peggy. And thank you all for inviting me to talk about gardening. It's been on my mind a lot over the past couple weeks. I got into working with the Vermont Garden Network and working with community gardening in Richmond kind of by chance. I really enjoyed studying food systems and thinking about how the food that we eat and where it comes from has such an impact in so many areas of our lives. And through that, I connected with Michelle at the Vermont Garden Network. I had a long time passion for farm to school programming. So thinking about children having garden access and garden education as part of their education from a really young age, and what a difference that makes, and what not just vegetables, not just what people eat, but their outlook on trying new things or their experience being outside and having that be something different than just maybe sports. So in school, I think about the way, and I grew up in Vermont. I had a really wonderful childhood where I did get to have these peaceful, wonderful moments playing outside in the woods, and that was just part of my life. And over the years, I've met many people who had very different experiences and did not have that same connection, and thinking about how a little box of soil can bring that element, even if you're living inner city or your residence is in an apartment building and you don't have a yard or access to that. So gardening has really integrated into so many areas of my life. Like Peggy said, I work for Feeding Chittenden in fundraising. And when I started there, I think I'm on year 4 there. It was pretty much a food shelf. And we had a lot of other outreach mechanisms, home delivery and meal preparation. And over the last couple of years, we now have a community garden, which I'll mention in one of the slides, and we have garden education, and we've partnered with the Vermont Garden Network and other organizations that are seeing gardening as so much more than just access to food, but a big part of comprehensive wellness. So it's exciting to talk to you all about community gardening today. I have a little background in the field, no pun intended, but the field of gardening with my work with Vermont Garden Network. And I, at the end, love to talk a little bit about what the process was to start the Richmond Community Garden, because it was my first experience starting this project, a project like this from scratch. And there were so many, it was an interesting journey with wonderful opportunities I never thought would just happen, and then challenges that I never expected. So we'll give a start. I'll give a background of what the various models of community gardening that we see in Vermont and beyond, why that's so important, and then, like I said, talk about what went into the Richmond Community Garden startup pilot year, which will be continuing for year 2. So I'd love to talk to anyone and answer any questions about how to get involved in that for the next season. And this cute little picture are some microgreens, which is how over the winter I scratch the gardening itch. They're super fun to grow indoors. You can just pop them on a windowsill if you get good sunlight, and you get pea shoots and sunflower sprouts and all sorts of yummy, crunchy things. So there are many different types of community gardens because people access this space for many different reasons. For some, a community garden is a place to grow food, flowers, herbs, and do it in the company of their neighbors and community members. In the Richmond Garden last year, we had a member who planted some pollinator seeds, some pollinator varieties, which was very cool, some beautiful flowers along with tons of different types of produce. I love to see that in gardens. I think vegetables and flowers growing together is just lovely on all ends. Some access these spaces as a way to get outside, exercise. Gardening is a lot of work, especially when you think about the amount of weeding and harvesting itself, planting. It's definitely exercise and a way to soak up some sunshine in the summer. And for some, it's the only opportunity to do this type of growing. So for years, I've lived in like apartment settings with very few yards. So in that situation, you're confined to either container growing, which is wonderful, but it doesn't give you the same opportunity to grow on a scale that produces a lot. So for folks in all areas with living in apartments or homes with little workable land around them, a community garden is a way to grow produce. And then this feeds into all of them, but community gardens are just a wonderful way to build community and to create connection amongst neighbors. So because people access these spaces for so many different reasons, they often take many different forms. The classic community garden is a plot of land. This can be owned by the town, privately owned, or rented. That's divvied up into lots of different small plots that individuals or families rent out season to season. The individual is responsible for the planting, harvesting, and upkeep of those spaces, and there is some form of leadership or volunteer component to these types of spaces to make them work. Let's see. In Vermont, and especially through the Vermont Garden Network, I've been exposed to a lot of other types of community gardens. These can be school gardens, which is, I think, the biggest subgroup of membership for Vermont Garden Network are all of the school gardens. Farm to School has been a huge part of Vermont education system for a while now. It's been around for a lot longer than in other states, and we see a huge range in what a school community garden looks like. For some, it's just one small raised bed or a couple small raised beds, and some schools have like greenhouses and huge plots that are kept up over the summer months by parents and families and volunteers. So the school gardens usually grow not for quantity necessarily, but as an educational opportunity. So students get to work in the garden. The produce that's grown is usually starred in taste tests. It can be integrated into school meals and other ways of exposing young children to vegetables, fruits and vegetables, but also the process of how they get from farm to plate or garden to plate. This, let's see. One component of school gardens that I think is kind of funny is over the summer months is when the majority of this gardening happens and school's not usually in session. So Vermont Garden Network has helped support schools, and how do you keep that healthy and happening over the summer months when no one's on campus or at school. And that we found that there are champions usually, that's what the lingo, champions at various schools who just really care about this opportunity and have organized volunteer days and kept these gardens alive over the summer months. So I think that piece is really cool, that even when there's really not that much going on, people are invested enough in this component of education to keep it happening. We support Vermont Garden Network supports a lot of gardens at businesses in all of Vermont, specifically Chittenden County because of the proximity connection. But there was a program for a long time called Green Thumbs at Work, and businesses adopted these community gardens because of there's some background noise, employee well-being. And these gardens hosted workshops throughout the summer that employees could access for free. They could volunteer in these garden plots, take home some of the produce, and it was a way for people to take breaks from their workday. It was especially popular at businesses with a lot of screen time. So people who are working on computers and kind of stationary all day, to have this garden opportunity to get outside, move a little bit, engage their brains and bodies in different ways. And that program suffered through COVID, obviously, but it is not gone, and a lot of places are looking for outside zones to convene and have meetings. So now these garden spaces are taking on a whole new purpose, which is a place to gather in a safe and distanced way. And again, like the school gardens, these were kept alive by volunteers even when people were not on site. Communal gardening is a version of community gardening. So we have an example of this in Burlington right now with the Victory Garden. I'm not sure if anyone has heard of this. It's a project with the Intervale and Shift Meals. It was born out of COVID, and it's a garden that is collectively taken care of. So instead of individuals having their own bed, a group of volunteers plants, weeds, caretakes, waters, harvests in a communal way. And those volunteers can share the produce that's grown. Last year and the year before, they grew so much produce that a lot of it was donated to different hunger relief food shelves, and it went into meal preparation through the free meal distribution that's been happening across the state and is still happening. So that model of communal gardening is something that I know a lot of people are really passionate about, because it shares the maintenance burden and in a way can actually produce more vegetables and more produce than the standard model where each person has their own bed. But it's that model takes a lot more leadership and a lot more like organization to make that possible. And it's Vermont Garden Network has a heavy investment in that. So one staff person, a big part of their job is helping make that operation possible. Food pantry gardens are something that we see a lot of. At Feeding Chittenden last summer, we built 6 raised beds. Their design is meant to be accessible via standing. So they are like 4 feet tall, I think. And they're huge. The amount of soil that it took to fill them was kind of funny. But they're designed that way so you don't have to, either get down on your knees or bend over when you're harvesting, so that people can be simply walking by and see and interact with the plants. Those garden beds grew a lot of different varieties. So again, we weren't going for quantity with that project. We were using it as an educational opportunity. We hosted workshops, but also we wanted to plant different kinds of herbs and produce that you don't customarily see in Vermont. So we have a new-ish initiative to increase the amount of culturally responsive food and try to grow vegetables, herbs, peppers are another one that are hard to access at grocery stores and that we almost never see through the Charitable Food Network. Many community gardens, specifically in we partnered last year with Burlington Community Gardens. So there's a couple different locations there. And we connected with garden leaders to see, do you have extra produce left over? For many gardeners in community gardens, they, will have 3 zucchini plants or something like that, and more zucchini than they know what to do with. That's the easy example. Tomatoes probably also fall under that category. So we started a program last summer that went around to different gardens and collected that extra produce. It was called Produce for the People, and then that was donated to the Feeding Chittenden food shelf and distributed. So lots of different ways that these spaces can fill different needs in the community. There's a couple other examples. One of them is a therapy garden. Vermont Garden Network is working with UVM Medical Center, and they have a Gardening for Health program. So the hospital has community garden plots, and they use that as to host a Gardening for Health class that's less focused on how do you plant all of these different things and more how do you use this garden space to generate health, exercise, nutrition, and mostly like getting outside and moving. But a key finding from that program was the impact that it had on people's mental health. So the opportunity to get outside and get their hands in the dirt was physically beneficial, but the piece that was noted most by participants was the how happy it made them and how exciting it was and stimulating to do that work. And my last example of a way a community garden can show up is by an educational garden. So there are a few of those in Chittenden County and in Burlington, and their whole purpose is to teach people how to garden. So there's a teaching garden course that's hosted by the Vermont Garden Network. If you're interested at all in a season-long course of how to grow, I cannot recommend it enough. I took it 2 years ago and it is fantastic. You get your own, I don't think it's maybe 4x10 plot. And there is class once a week for 2 hours and an occasional Saturday workshop. And the teacher, Angela, will walk you through everything from prepping the bed, planting, caretaking, harvesting. There's fun workshops on different types of food preservation, a whole herbalism component. It was an incredible experience. And there's usually about 15 students in the class, so it's small with a couple of teachers, and it was really very, very cool. So I have some pictures here from the Richmond Garden. This was at peak berry season here, and having shared spaces within a whole community garden is a popular component. So in this case, all of those berries, last year they were so intense that I don't think between 15 people you could have kept up with the harvest that those bushes put out. It was insane. And then this picture over on the left are some greens from my plot. I had nasturtiums that went crazy, and lettuce and spinach. Everything I put in the ground there did well. That soil is just unreal. So I think I have another picture on here. This is before things went in the ground. So these beds are 4x20, and we had the family farm came in and used their tractor and tiller to help us churn up these two sections of the garden because the hand tiller would have taken kind of a long time. So we were able to get that done and get the beds dug in a pretty quick fashion. But again, this model in Richmond is a pretty standard classic community garden, divvied up into beds, and each person is responsible for their own. So this picture is also from the Richmond Garden. There's a row of peonies that bloomed, I think before a lot of people got in there. Maybe not, maybe you remember them, but they were beautiful. The benefits, we talk about the benefits of gardening. I feel like I talk about it all the time between the different programs that I'm kind of involved in, between Garden Network and Feeding Chittenden. But there is just such a sense of accomplishment and excitement to see that final harvest. So this picture is from, so I had a plot and my partner had a plot also right next to us. So we had double duty there. And this is a little taste I think towards the tail end of the season of some of the things that came out of the ground. And what was cool was, so we had tomatillos, edamame, and some other peppers. And I remember talking to a couple people who did not know that those could even grow in Vermont. And there are so many different types of produce that you wouldn't think would thrive and grow well in this climate. And through gardening, I've learned, I didn't know tomatillos would grow here until I took that garden class, and that was one of the options. And some of the hot peppers also were very, there's so many different varieties of them, and diving into that and seeing different, just trying new things. I planted a couple things last year that I didn't even know what they were, to be honest. And so when they finally matured and I picked them, I had to do a little bit of research to figure out how to eat them. But the connection that you get with the land through going through this whole process from seed or from start to this final harvest is such a beautiful experience. And through community gardening, there have been many different strategies I've learned, and also challenges that I've had support in tackling, because it doesn't take much for everything to kind of go the wrong way, whether it be pests or disease or just not thinning your carrots, different things like that make such a huge difference in what you get as an end result. So that learning process through a community environment is just a beautiful part of community gardening. I think my favorite has been the exposure to new foods and the different types of reactions. So do you see the ground cherries here? They're in the bowl next to the tomatoes. They're those husk cherries. That was, I tried those for the first time from a CSA I had. And they were so delicious. Just these cherry, they were, a combo between a cherry, a tomatillo, and a tomato. And they were so delicious. And I have grown them every year for a while. And those are the absolute star. I've had people come and see the plot, and they're always, what are these? And they try them for the first time. And it's like a mind-blowing experience. So I think that's one of the most fun parts of this whole process, is seeing different types of food, watching it grow, and then watching people interact with it for the first time. It's just so fun. This is also the garden towards its tail end. I was holding out for a couple more zucchini, I think, but the rest of it was getting pretty cleaned up at this point. The health component, there are a lot of scientific studies that have been done on the benefits of gardening, both your physical and mental well-being. And I don't have enough research backed up to share too much of that, but from what I've heard, the benefits go from a way to move and to exercise and a way to get outside. And from some, I've heard that just the biological makeup of the soil and getting your hands in the soil has these impacts on your mood boosting, and like improved brain functioning from just working in the dirt. Again, I have that as secondhand knowledge, so I might have to look up some more scholarly references to share with you all on that front. But I think anyone who's had an experience of really getting your hands dirty and working in the soil can attest to what a powerful experience that is. And it's just such a fun thing. In all of the various gardening projects that I've worked on, you see so many smiles and so many people experiencing a reprieve. So I took 2 garden courses through the last 2 years when COVID was still, it was a challenging, we weren't sure if the course was going to happen. It started remote and we were able to go in person in a very distanced, masked up way. And one of the most powerful reflections from that experience was the how genuinely happy people became from coming to the garden, and what an escape that felt like for them from some of the stresses and the pressure that they were living under at the current moment. And that piece alone has fueled a lot of the work that Vermont Garden Network is putting into accessibility. So how do we make that experience accessible for people regardless of their income, their ability, their background? So how do we get that opportunity to exist for people all across the state? Because this, above anything, the happiness component of it is something that people have a right to experience and should not just be for, they have as an upper class experience or something like that. That this is something, regardless of where you live and where you come from, that we want people to be able to take part in. And there's Peggy putting the first plant in the community garden last year. I think that was a tomatillo plant, right? Yeah. I love that picture. I think it's so fun. So that has really stimulated a lot of the outreach to different communities to help establish these community garden plots so that people in communities across the state can have access to it. In Richmond, I'd been living there for a couple years, and I was going into Burlington to grow, because I was connected to community gardens there. I took the class, and I remember wishing that experience, that I could just have it really close to home. And I had known of some opportunities for that were fairly limited in the area. And Michelle at Vermont Garden Network connected me with Jim Feinson, who has been living in Richmond for a while. And he comes from, the business side of gardening with Gardener Supply and otherwise. And I come from the community organizing side of gardening. And we got together via Zoom in, I think it was January, before the 2021 growing season, and had a couple meetings of what do we need to do to make this happen. And I was able to take a course through Vermont Garden Network about that had to do with community organizing around creating a garden. And that was so helpful because there were so many pieces of that project that were very far off my radar, because most of the community gardening plots that I'd worked in over the years had been around for decades. So a lot of that infrastructure had been in place. And we didn't have a specific area in mind for that, but there were opportunities to go check out. So Jim and I went on a little tour around town, and we saw some very undeveloped farmland near the creamery buildings. And that I do hope that in the future we have some kind of area there, and that the community gardens of Richmond continue to grow in different parts. That project, the land was perfect and ready to grow on. It was actually previously farmed land, but there was no access to water. There was no fenced in area. There was no parking. There were a lot of pieces of the puzzle that weren't going to fit together for that to be kickstarted in 2021. And we continued around networking with folks, found a couple other spots, but the one that checked the most boxes was where we settled in last year on Gary Bresser's property there on the corner. And this had pretty much everything we needed to get going. Having a fenced in area was really important because for maybe not so much in this area, but depending on how rural you are, you might get a lot of animal traffic through there. So we wanted to keep that at a minimum. And there was access to water. The old chicken coop serves as our temporary tool shelter. So Martha, I think your tomato cages are in there. That's my best guess. And Gary and Jean offered to let us use this property free of charge, which was huge in keeping the participant cost at a minimum, and that was pretty important to us. So once we had that, there were some opportunities from community members of volunteered labor. So the land was volunteered, the tilling was volunteered by the family farm. They came in and tilled that up in like 20 minutes for us, which would have taken weeks if we'd tried to do that on our own. And we connected with different resources from the Vermont Garden Network. So we had to write up some agreements between landowner, participant, a lot of that kind of admin side of the relationship. We were really supported in that. Because it is private land, we did have to purchase insurance for that time period. And we had to cover the cost of watering. So between those two things, we devised a participant fee, for rental, that we tried to keep that as low as possible. And I think that this year, if we reach more folks, we might be able to keep that cost pretty low. Jim and I talked about different pricing structures as a form of access. And I think that that's something we do hope that if someone can't pay, that we want to be able to do the fundraising and find the resources so that opportunity is still there. And that will happen for this coming year. Let's see if there's anything else to mention. We have acquired some grant funding for this next year, which is really exciting. It came together so fast last year that there were a lot of elements of this that were not, polished and perfect. It was absolutely a pilot year. But we have some money to build raised beds so that we can make some more accessible options for people who are not, it doesn't feel comfortable to be working on their knees on the ground. And also to make the pathways a little more official and not full of very sketchy holes and other things that we had to work around last year. So we'll be putting a lot of work into this in the coming year, and we're really excited to continue to offer this programming in this space. I've started some conversations with some of the Vermont Garden Network educators, and we're hoping to host some classes and other events at the garden this year. we didn't have, I think we had around 8 gardeners last year, which was honestly a perfect number for a pilot year. It was very manageable, and it helped us gather feedback and understand what we could do to make this experience better. We have capacity for, I think, 16 gardeners, and we're hoping to fill that this year. And we want to do more community-oriented activities and experiences. So those are some of the goals for the coming year. And if I were to think, maybe 5 years down the road, I think that there's enough interest and engagement in the Richmond community to have more than one area. And so with increased advertising and getting the word out, and I hope that all of you will share this with folks that you know around town who might be interested. I think that the more people know about this opportunity, the more excitement will be behind it, and the more that we'll be able to do. So that's pretty much it. And I'd like to leave a couple minutes if anyone has any questions or wants to share anything.
I have a question about the education, the 4x10 class 1 week.
Yes.
How does one access information about that?
Yes. So the enrollment is happening right now. The Vermont Garden Network website is vtgardens.org. I can also email Peggy some of and Martha, I have your email too. So I can send you the link on the website to read more. It's called the Community Teaching Garden. It is 24 weeks. It starts in May and ends in October. It meets on Wednesdays from 5:30 to 7:30. It's at the Ethan Allen Homestead in Burlington. And that course provides everything you're going to need for the entire season of gardening: the plot, all of the seeds and starts, the education, all of it. It's such an amazing experience. I really couldn't recommend it more. And I'll send the website link and how you sign up out via email.
Thank you.
And my other question is really more for Peggy and Jane. And will this be a senior center activity? Could we have the senior center sign up for 2 or 3 plots and bring in us old folks to garden? George?
I like that idea.
Martha, are you thinking of these 3 or 4 plots different people would work on them, right?
Yeah.
I think that's
It would be like a communal garden.
Yeah.
Within.
Yeah.
There is also space in the Richmond garden that's not divvied up into plots. And the plan for this year is to make that workable. So if there was interest in a communal garden within the Richmond community garden, maybe a slightly larger or separate plot that was worked communally, that's something we can make happen. There's a lot of room in that area to work with. So if you have any ideas or desires for that plot, I would love to hear it.
We have an activities committee meeting on actually tomorrow. Peggy, you want to come to that? Do you have free time at 3 to convince people this would be a great thing to do?
I'll try, Martha. I'll write it down right now.
Okay. Okay, let's hope that works. I think it'd be fun. This would be kind of
That would be awesome.
I think I had more in mind that this was going to be. Peggy and I wouldn't be there by ourselves, that we'd have a whole bunch of other folks kind of working together, and this would be an opportunity.
That would be good. That's a really good idea, Martha.
Okay.
If we only can keep up our enthusiasm like Hannah does.
Well, I'll tell you why my cages are now in the shed is that I knew I was supposed to come and clean up, but somehow I missed the date. I was supposed to be there to clean up and, too late.
No worries.
That doesn't throw me out for this year. I can still come back.
No, you're still in, Martha. Pilot year, that's a wash.
Thank you.
Yeah, I do feel like I learned a lot and I'm already thinking, oh no, don't do that again. Don't do that.
Yeah.
Do that again. Don't do that. I guess that's the way it works with gardens.
I think so.
Hannah, you said that about your ground cherries, that those were the most exciting thing, but the day you were there harvesting, you were talking, I think, about eggplants, little eggplants that you were very excited about. What were those?
Those were Japanese eggplants.
Oh.
And I love those because they're like a single serving eggplant size. You know, that they don't get huge. They're kind of long and skinny.
Yeah.
And we had one plant and we got quite a few eggplant from it over the course of the whole season. And I've grown the traditional eggplant and they're kind of high maintenance. And it's a big fruit by the end, big vegetable by the end. So the Japanese eggplant are really very user friendly, I think. And they grew well in that plot.
Hannah, does the soil have a lot of nutrients or is it necessary to fertilize?
So we're going to do a soil test through UVM. They offer soil testing. It's $15. So if you have any home plots that you want to get your soil tested on, I'd recommend it. And then you can see what you need to add or to modify. That plot was years ago. It was farmed, and also there were chickens there. And I think the combination of that produced easily the most fertile soil I've ever worked on.
Wow.
And we bought some compost last year. Actually, we had it donated. And I don't think we ever used it. I think we used a little bit here and there during planting, but it was perfect right off the bat, which that's rare. So we don't, this year we're going to go through the process of testing the soil and seeing what we need to amend to make sure that it's ready to go. But yeah, it was a special circumstance.
I didn't use anything on this. It grew amazing tomatoes and potatoes. That's all I grew last year. And they were fabulous, except for my sweet potatoes.
Oh.
I didn't plant them early enough, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't use any amendments really at all, and everything.
Yeah.
Hannah, how do you sign up for a plot? You've convinced me.
Wonderful. So we haven't finished writing up our participant agreements yet. So just send me an email, and I will, when I send out the materials, I'll make sure that you get that. I'm going to go back to the very beginning of this presentation, hopefully. Yeah, this is my email at the bottom. And you can just send me an email and say that you're interested in having a plot next year, and I'll make sure that we save one for you. Right now, I think pretty much everyone who gardened with us last year is interested in continuing, which is pretty cool, even though it was just a pilot year and there was a lot of messiness to it. and I'm going to start towards the beginning of April, sending out via Front Porch Forum, maybe try to get in touch with some folks at the town center to see the best way to put the word out about registration. We are officially a 501c3, which is really exciting. That opens up doors for us to pursue some different types of grant funding and otherwise. But hopefully we have a website that I have to do some work on, and other little bits and pieces that are coming together over the next couple months. But definitely for now, just send me an email, let me know you're interested, and I'll make sure that when we get all of our paperwork in order, we get you signed up.
Great, thanks.
Thank you.
Well, if there aren't any more questions, we'll let Hannah get outdoors. And
This made me so excited to start growing. I just want to.
thank you so much.
Thank you, Hannah.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm really glad I was here to hear you and think about it.
Let me know if any of you have thoughts on establishing a mini communal plot or whatever. Like I said, we have some grant funding already secured to build some raised beds and other features. So if you have any feedback or recommendations for how we can make that space work for everyone in the community, I would love to hear it. And hopefully in April, we have Day in the Dirt, which is a volunteer event to help kind of kickstart things and clean the gardens up if there's no snow. And I'm thinking that will be a great opportunity to start building and laying paths and so on. So in the next month, we can keep this going for years, but in the next month, if you think of things that you want to start building, just let me know.
Okay.
All right. Thank you all for having me.
Thanks again, Hannah.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.